And we're live.
Tim, I like your new intro video. That's so cool.
Yes, that's something I knocked off. It took me about an hour and a half to do.
I was going to say, that's not easy to do with all the editing involved.
Well, I use a package called Camtasia, actually, which is surprisingly easy to use. So it's trawling through all the old videos, taking bits out and putting effects on. That's the harder part. And I found exactly the right bit of music as well. So that's good.
It looks really good. And I love the clips you used. You used Jeremy and who else?
Deborah.
Yeah.
And then there's you. And then I put in the Montgolfier brothers balloon.
All right. The quiz we did, England versus America, which quite frankly, I think we've realized that neither.
I remember when I was I don't know if I told you this last week, but when I was a kid, we used to go on holiday in France quite a bit. And we bought, I think it was like the Laughing Cow is this sort of cheese spread thing that you can get in the UK. And there's an equivalent one in France. Okay. And it had this little insert in it with like all of the inventions, and they were all like, the telephone was invented by Mr. Leclerc du whatever. It was like basically everything was invented by French people. So I think every country in the world has its own sort of collection of inventors that's been around for any length of time.
And we're all claiming to be the inventors, and really we know that that's not the case. It goes back.
A lot of the time, every country can have a different person, because you just had one person who was developing it at the time, and nobody really knows who the first person was. So I'm sure with like the COVID vaccine, if more than one of them works, then there'll be like joint credit. It won't be like, oh, it's the Imperial College one was out first, or Oxford one, or the New York whatever one. Because it's very hard to kind of say like, oh, which one is the most effective, so to speak, and which one is actually the first commercially used one.
I actually heard from a friend who said that they're on the brink of discovering a vaccine, or they've already had people go through trials. It seems to be working, but this company in US anyways is they want to give it away for free. However you do that, I don't know. They don't want it to be for sale by the government. I don't know. I don't even know this language. I barely know what I'm talking about, but he said that enough people volunteered to be part of the trials. Something like 35,000 people volunteered to be part of the trials. And if all goes well, they want to start giving it out to whoever will take it free of charge.
Yeah, well, there's a whole load of big trials going on. I mean, there's at least 2 in the UK. I think there's at least 2 in the US. I think there's a couple in China as well. So chances are one of them will be effective. Now, one of the problems that people have started talking about is how long immunity lasts for COVID. Because there have been anecdotal things of people who have been like caught it 3 months afterwards. So it may be possible, but the main thing is that actually, because I saw some like YouTube video where somebody said, oh, it's like a vaccine won't work if the antibodies don't last for more than 3 months or so. But actually, as long as the antibodies work for some period of time, that is longer incubation time.
Yeah,
the vaccination is still an effective strategy against it, because if you can vaccinate enough people in a short enough period of time, even it's just surrounding all the outbreaks, you just vaccinate everybody surrounding an outbreak, then that is an effective way to actually stop the disease. So I think there is reason to hope, so to speak, with the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
There's way more reason to hope than I think a lot of people think, because people are cherry picking like news articles and stories and things to whatever that. If you want to be negative about it, you can be negative about it. If you want to be positive about it, you can be positive about it.
There's so many conspiracy theories going on around the vaccine. I I'm not a conspiracy theorist, if that's what you call it. I don't fall into that. Could there be some truth to maybe some, possibly, I don't know. But how do you feel about the conspiracy theories surrounding all the vaccines?
I would think that most of them are totally stupid. I mean, you hear things about Bill Gates going to implant a chip into everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no. I mean, we haven't quite got to the stage of nano. It's just like common sense. We haven't got to the stage of that kind of nanotechnology that they could inject it into you in some small needle. Anything they inject into you is going to be like a liquid compound. So 20 or 30 years ahead, yeah, okay, they may be injecting chips into everybody, but they really don't need to do that kind of stuff. The governments have got so much access to everything anyway that it's, I mean, every email, I mean, there's this whole thing, and whether this is true or not, I don't know, this system called Echelon that the UK and the US supposedly can scan every email in the entire world for stuff.
Yeah.
The US have got, US and the UK and they've got an enormous amount of infrastructure already for spying on everybody. So why would they need to go around injecting stuff into people? Why? I mean, the bigger problem I think with vaccines and with COVID will be if there's an effective vaccine, but it has symptoms in some small number of, it has like side effects in small number of people.
Yeah.
So let's say, and even if it doesn't have side effects, there's so many cases that like somebody could be vaccinated and then get run over instantly afterwards when they run across the road outside. Now, clearly that's unrelated, but if somebody has a heart attack afterwards, that could be totally unrelated to the vaccine, but somebody will say, oh, my friend so-and-so had a heart attack after having the vaccine, even though it's nothing to do with the vaccine.
Yeah.
That is the worry. And then you get the whole kind of autism and other people who are like, look for statistics. I mean, this is one of the terrible things I've seen lately with a lot of the COVID sort of news articles and reports is people cherry picking, like, so it's kind of like you'll find a study where they throw away half the data and then it's like they look at trends in a little bit and it's like, oh, anybody can do it. I think it's called p-hacking or something, which is this phenomenon where people, you have a massive group and then you throw out all of the data that doesn't mix your like opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, there's a lot of that kind of dodgy science going on. In fact, I think this crisis has demonstrated just how like terribly easy it is to distort science in terms of research.
Is England, do you guys tend to fall for conspiracy theories the way we do here in America?
Well, I wouldn't have thought so, but I mean, there was a lot of people going this whole 5G thing. I don't know if you had that.
I've heard of, okay, so this is how I've heard of that, but you could explain it more because I don't quite understand that kind of stuff. My mind just doesn't think this way. My youngest son first introduced me to whatever that is. And now more recently, I'm seeing a bunch of videos on it kind of pop up in my Facebook. What is it? What are they talking about? Something in the air? I mean, I don't.
No, well,
what's happening?
You've got one of these devices, haven't you? It's called a phone, right?
Yeah.
Now, these phones, at the moment, you either connect to Wi-Fi if you're in your house, and then that gives you data and rest of it. But normally when you're out and about, they will connect to a cell tower. And at the moment, the format they use is called 4G or fourth generation, like cell connection. Okay. So that goes over one particular radio wave frequency. Radio waves and light waves and microwaves are all in effect the same thing, really. Well, actually, radio waves, no, radio waves is different, but anyway. So it's, of course, at the moment they use 4G, and there used to be 3G before that, which was another. So every couple of years, every 10, 15 years, the mobile phone companies upgrade their signaling standard to the cell towers. So you get faster data and you get like quicker stuff. So the latest one is called 5G, which is the next upgrade. So they're moving to another frequency band, which they haven't used yet, which the governments of the world associate with them. And they have to put up new masts for that. Now, the conspiracy theory is that because they are blaming putting up these masks for causing COVID. Now, it makes no sense, really, because there's lots of countries in the world that haven't even started installing their 5G networks, which have got be those cases of COVID.
Yeah.
And also, it's like, well, it's just another radio wave band. But the problem is people false equivalence. They've seen that, like, oh, they started putting up these 5G masts at about the same time that COVID started, so it must be caused by that. And it's like, well, no. Is correlation and causation. So just because something correlates with something, so it happens at the same time or it goes up, it doesn't actually mean it's causing it.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why that was quite popular in the UK for a bit. I mean, it's totally stupid, but
it's going around here a lot, and there's a lot of videos going up. But we can be a conspiracy theory nation. People love their conspiracy theories across the board. I mean, I could give a million reasons as to why, but why do we, why? I don't know. It's like, can we just live and not live in fear all the time? There's enough reality to be fearful of. Can we stop with the conspiracy theories and I
mean, to some extent, I think you don't want to totally stop conspiracy theories, and you don't want people making suggestions about things, because then you get into this whole kind of people are just by whatever the government tells them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there has been a lot of pushback, because from next Friday we have got to. It used to be you had to wear masks if you went in public transport, but now you have to wear masks in shops as well. Okay. It's never been the case in the UK in the COVID thing until next Friday. Now, a lot of the reason for pushback is that the government basically has given really no reason whatsoever for introducing this.
Okay.
Apart from like, oh well, it's a bit of extra protection sort of thing. I think that it's totally right for people to ask why. I think actually it's almost a citizen's duty. If a government introduces anything, they should give a reason, and they should say this is why we're doing it. Even if it's kind of like, well, from the data we've seen on the shops, we've seen that people are getting COVID in supermarkets because people aren't wearing masks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you want a society where everybody blindly accepts what the government says, because then you are very vulnerable to people in government. And especially in this, I mean, I really do hope that a lot of the freedoms that have been taken away during the COVID crisis are all returned. It's possible a lot may not be, and that's the more worrying kind of aspect to this crisis, especially if there isn't an immediate vaccine or cure for it. It just sort of lingers on for years.
Yeah,
it could get to the point where we forget we need the government's permission to do everything, and that could be
that gets dangerous. I agree with questioning everything, always question everything, but I guess I'm speaking from a US point of view where there's just so many conspiracy theories always about everything, and then let's boycott everything and let's not look at science, and it becomes so much. I have a question for you, Tim, though, because speaking of a vaccine here, everywhere, worldwide, I mean, it kind of reminds me of polio. Comparing a vaccine when polio, I don't know what the history is there. I don't know the story surrounding it, but at some point, polio was horrific and a vaccine came out somehow, and people this was life or death at that time as well. And do you know anything about that time period and polio and the vaccine?
Well, polio was a long-running thing for it was centuries and centuries. It was more what you would call if you say malevolent to sort of AIDS or something like that. So it was like a big burden on society, but it wasn't a big pandemic. I don't really know too much about polio. I think it's some sort of bacterial infection.
I'm curious because suddenly it was like it became a worldwide crisis and a vaccine was developed. So was it something they ignored up until that point, and then?
Well, no, there wasn't really. I mean, like FDR had suffered from that polio. That's why he was disabled. Not that you would have known it until well after he was president publicly. But yeah, I mean, it was like people suffered it, but they were usually paralysed or they were in some way disabled afterwards by an attack of polio. All I remember about the vaccine is it's actually in the sugar lump. It's kind of an edible one. It's a weird vaccine, the polio one. It's kind of, at least in the UK.
No, ours is a shot. we get a shot.
Well, most of the other ones were shots, like measles and all the rest of them. But yeah, polio, they give it in a sugar cube. I could be making that up, but I don't think I am.
We got a sugar cube. We didn't get a sugar cube. We got a shot.
Right down to Google. Let's have a look on Google.
And it changed because, like, when my mom got the polio shot, if I remember correctly, it caused her to have she kind of has a scar in her arm. So, I mean, it changed over the years.
Yeah.
And so, but vaccines are interesting. I mean, studying the history of diseases are interesting to me. I'm one of those people who will go on YouTube and watch specials. I think I told you this last week about the history of vaccines and certain diseases and that kind of thing, and how it changed society and culture.
That's the reason now I'm like looking at this website and like you end up down a rabbit hole. But apparently it was the first vaccine was it was an oral one. It was given, and then they changed to giving it a shot.
Wow. So okay.
I think, I say I don't remember. I remember my mum telling me, so it maybe I probably just had a shot. But my mum had
your mom got
80, so she would have had one of the first sort of live ones. Because apparently it was like a live vaccine, the very first one that came out.
Okay.
Wow,
interesting.
Anyway, that's like enough on talking about polio.
I know. I was interesting. Okay. Huh. All right, Tim, show us what's behind your head. Think independently. Tell me about that. Why did you choose that?
Well, initially when this whole mask thing came in, I must admit I was a little bit pissed off with it. And I was thinking, I always like to work out why I get upset about things. And it's not really because I care less about wearing the mask as such. But I think a lot of it is, how did it get to that quote? So I saw like lots of people posting things like wear a mask or why are people like, and I think the thing that upset me about a lot of that stuff on social media and other things was that it's people just accepting like things. Like they will have an opinion that is based on somebody else has told them something.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not thinking independently. They're thinking based on I mean, to some extent, none of us are scientists and none of us are kind of necessarily have the skills. And in a lot of our life, you can't think independently about absolutely everything. But I think you have to appreciate that other people have different opinions about things. So, like in South Africa, they banned alcohol as part of their like COVID prevention sort of measures.
Oh wow!
And you could say that's uniquely South African because there's a lot of issues with. In normal, they have their reason for doing it, which sounds a bit tenuous to me, is that there was so much alcohol-related violence anyway that they had to ban alcohol to free up space for the COVID patients or something. But actually, there was many reasons in a lot of cases to ban alcohol, to force people to wear face coverings, especially because cloth and other face coverings are considerably less effective than surgical or the N95 ventilator ones, which only people in hospitals are given access to. So, I mean, it's kind of like if they've said, like in the US and the UK, we're going to ban alcohol because drunk people can't socially distance, which is a perfectly valid thing to say, everybody being up in arms. So I think a lot of the time it's that people are very happy to have a go at other people for measures that they agree with or are easy for them to implement. But if there's a different measure that's brought in and asked to them, it really would affect their life. I mean, I'd be okay with them banning alcohol because I've not really been drinking all that much for the last couple of weeks or during lockdown, few Zoom drinks and the rest of it. But for a lot of people, that would be a massive infringement of their life.
Yeah.
So I think it's the whole think independently thing is about, like, it's not necessarily what your opinion is. It's just appreciating that other people have opinions. If that makes any sense. I think I've gone off on a...
No, it does. It does. I saw someone post, a friend of mine posted on Facebook that very similar to what you said. There's a very good possibility that those of us with ideas and opinions have researched and we have our reasons for it.
Yeah.
And so to go off on each other. Now, wearing a mask will cause you not to spit on other people, and that, you know, you're not able to breathe on other people as well. So, I mean, that's one side of the debate. But the other side of the debate is people with PTSD and anxiety might have a problem with the mask. And so understanding, I mean, I've heard of people who have stories about why the mask isn't feasible for them. And there's other opinions, there's other sides.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen people post on Twitter because there are people with severe disabilities who can't wear a mask because of their breathing issues.
And that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, I sort of like, I've been looking into as much of the research and stuff as I can, and I can kind of understand it in some ways. But as I say, it's a measure. I mean, it's kind of like, it seems a bit strange in the UK that we're now suggesting, after all of these months, that people should wear masks in shops, when we've now let people go back to the pub and drink inside and outside without a mask because they don't have to wear a mask in pubs and restaurants. So
that's where it gets weird. The rules do conflict. They do conflict.
Yeah.
I'm very pro-mask. We've been doing it. I think we were told to do it since the beginning, if I remember right, or near the beginning. I'm pro-mask. But I will say I'm someone, because I have extreme anxiety and CPTSD, there's time. As soon as I get out of the store, I have to take it off because my anxiety gets high. You start getting into anxiety mode, you do start hyperventilating. And there are people who are like that. I literally get out of the store and I tear the mask off. I do my best to keep it on. So I see both sides. I am pro-mask.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the, I mean, it's like, I mean, I actually wore a mask in the dentist because that's been mandated, and that kind of makes sense in a way. Though, ironically, the dentist who ended up talking to me had his mask underneath his nose. How effective that was.
Face, people.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, this is one of the problems in that if you're taking the mask on and off all the time, then obviously, like, you could have, like, the mask itself becomes a potential vector for. And the biggest problem I have, like, it's like Tim Son, if he ever appears on the thing, he posted about the Pennsylvania's new rules. But they still allowing meetings up to 40 people indoors or something like that. And I'm like, no, it's 25 people. Now, it hasn't been, it was, for a long time, it was like you could only have meetings of 2 people outside or anywhere in the UK in the lockdown. And I think it's like 6 people indoors, and you're supposed to keep distancing inside. And it's like, what if you're allowing gatherings of 25 people indoors, and it doesn't matter if you're wearing masks or whatever, it's like you're screwed. It's like, everybody in the US seems to be obsessed with which side you're on the mask debate, and they're just ignoring all the other more important measures, like trying to minimize social contacts in a way.
Well, now I'm in California, as you know. Our state,
Yeah.
well, I think last I heard, 30 counties have nearly shut down again. Schools are not going back in the fall in San Diego, and then 29 other counties. Schools are not going back in the fall, and we've shut down hair salons, barbershops. Restaurants can meet on the patio outside. You wear a mask, and there's some social distancing rules and health regulations they follow. And I can't remember everything else. If you're not an essential business, you don't get to be open. But I can't remember all the rules. But San Diego was not shut down to the extent that we were originally, but pretty close, I would say. And they're trying to, I need to read the rules again. But we were one of the counties that were watch out, step back, shut down. So California is back to almost step one.
Yeah.
So whatever we need to do it's a whole other topic, but yeah, it's hard keeping up with. Again, every state is different, so
yeah,
it's hard to keep up. Here's something I found out, Tim. I thought everyone had shut their borders to America. Living in San Diego, I have found out that's not the case to Mexico. We can actually go to Mexico, at least Baja California. I know people who have gone down there. Canada, no, we can't get into Canada. They're keeping us out. But
can you still go over the bridge to Tijuana Airport?
What?
Because, I know Tijuana or whatever, the city just over the border. Their airport has a footbridge over to the US.
Yeah, I think so. I know someone who went down to Mexico. So
yeah, so what you could do is just go over the border to Mexico through the bridge, then fly to Mexico City, and then connect to someone else. I don't know what the situation is in Mexico. The big problem now is that you are very vulnerable in any third country you go through if you're trying to reach the final destination, because you don't want to go into Mexico and then find you, and then you have to quarantine in Mexico for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's true. You have to. So I think the rules mostly are, if you go anywhere, you have to quarantine for 14 days before you go visit anyone. And then there's some kind of 14-day quarantine coming back. So it becomes a challenge. I don't know. And I don't know if that's the case around the world or what exactly that is, but.
Well, it's like with the mastering, we introduced quarantine really late. So we didn't have it, and then we suddenly introduced it about a month ago or something. And now they've changed the rules again to allow a whole load of European countries not to have to bother with quarantine. Portugal, I think, is about the only country in Europe that we haven't got that with for some reason because they had an outbreak. The US is not on the list of countries. So if you came to the UK from the US, you'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks. The trouble is, I know because they put in no plans for quarantine really. So it's basically you come in and you say that you have to quarantine, but they're not really gonna. They could try and spot check you, but you've got to get wherever you're going. So if you've already got COVID, you're just going to spread it all on the tube or taxi or whatever you take to get to wherever you're going to go to.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a silly policy, really, quarantine.
It's up to each individual to make the right choice. Are you going to do something out of selfishness? Or are you going to hopefully do something that protects everyone? Do your best, to protect the world versus it comes down to choices and what choices you're going to make. So yeah, so there's that, Tim. We're all in this together.
Yeah, well, one of the things I've seen mentioned a few times and hopefully will come through is fast testing. So supposedly, there's all these companies being able to do like tests when they can give you a result in like half an hour or 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, if that starts coming in, then that's going to make travel and everything a lot easier, because you could go to like San Diego Airport, sit and have a test while you're in the waiting area, and if you've got COVID, they're like, well, you can't fly, you have to go and isolate at home.
Meanwhile, you've already spread it to everyone that you just came in contact with.
Well, I mean, the trouble is, like, if you think about it, there's a couple of ways you could do it. Well, if you had enough tests, you could have like a home one that you did the day beforehand, and then you do another one when you're at the airport. And like, it had to be negative on both before you go. But I mean, there's always the possibility that you could catch COVID from somebody on the same plane as you.
Yeah.
Or a cleaner who happens to be working in the airport goes around and passes it. Or there's some stray particles of it flapping around in the air.
Yeah.
But being able to do, because at the moment it's so slow, like a day in the UK anyway, the tests they've got. And they're also unpleasant, the tests. Like, you have to put a spatula in the back of your mouth and then shove it up your nose.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah. But I know they have like blood tests and other ones, because I've seen them on like YouTube channels, but I think they're a lot more expensive.
I would rather give a blood test than do the whole.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I've heard people say it's horrible, but ugh.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, like with that kind of test, especially if you've got home kits. So you send somebody a home kit with like a thing, they might screw it up. They might not. They might just push it and not push it far enough to actually touch their tonsils.
Yeah.
And it could be a false negative. So the easier a test is for somebody to do in a home situation, the better. The quicker the results come back. I mean, ideally, you want one as like a little strip or something, and like you do it, and then it tells you, oh, you've got COVID.
It's like a pregnancy test. One line means negative, two lines or whatever. Okay, so,
It's like, congratulations, you haven't got COVID, but you're pregnant.
We have got to get, oh my gosh. I look forward to the day that this is over. I'm just like international crisis, twilight zone. I don't have words.
Yeah. Well, I seem to be like, I seem to be coming out of my, because like very fatigued, and I suspect it may have been. The trouble is, like, I don't know. I had some sort of infection in February before I went to social media marketing world, actually, which may have been COVID, but I don't know. And there still aren't antibody tests available, and it's so long since I had it that it's possible, even if I did have it, I haven't got any antibodies anymore.
Yeah.
But now I'm beginning to get over a lot of the fatigue and other thing, and my internet most of the time seems to be working now, which is nothing to do with COVID or fatigue.
I was waiting for the correlation there.
Yeah, well, again, I could say like, my fatigue went as soon as my internet started going. Therefore, with internet, I get fatigued. You see, that's the conspiracy theory logic.
Or Zoom fatigue, or
and where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so I'm starting to kind of get into the position where I'm actually doing sort of decent work and stuff again, and adjusting to, because I've been working from home for like 6 years now, ish, and I did learn like last year really that I'm not particularly productive most of the time at home, and I'm like, I've got to work more. I've got to make more effort to go to like sort of co-working spaces, and then of course COVID comes in and kills all that off. Because I think you really discover whether you're an introvert or not when you try and work from home. And I don't think people are necessarily as introverted as they necessarily think, because depends what your base situation like. If you were in a family situation where there's like 20 people in the house or whatever, or even if you're like in a couple and you've got 2 or 3 children, that's a very different baseline to living on your own in a place. And I think like the level of you have to be extremely, extremely introverted to live on your own and work on your own.
Yeah.
There are people like that, but I suspect that. And then you get all this weird sort of introverted, extroverted stuff that people call themselves. And it's like, well, no, I think it's just you're either an introvert or an extrovert, but your baseline changes depending on what your base situation is like.
Yeah. I call myself an outgoing introvert. And the reason I do that is because I can come across as very outgoing, but I can be exhausted after an event. Like if I went to social media marketing world, I would come across probably as very outgoing, but I would go home and sleep for a week or 2 because it would exhaust me, all that energy of people. And then I pick up energy. So good energy, bad energy, whatever, that can exhaust me. And I could easily go sit in a corner versus be in the middle of people. It kind of just depends on what's happening. So discovering in my 40s, I think I'm an outgoing introvert. I was an extrovert based on the fact that people on the one.
Well, I mean, to be fair, people, there isn't really a strict definition of, there were a couple of definitions of introvert and extrovert.
Yeah.
The one I like is Jung's one, which is like where you get energy from. If you get energy from being on your own, you're an introvert. If you get energy being with other people, you're an extrovert.
What if both?
Well, if you get energy from both, then you're just an energizer bunny.
Well, in my case, I get energy from being with people, and then I'm exhausted, so I get energy from sleeping.
Yeah. I mean, when I go to something like social media marketing, when I'm energized, I'm always energized going to events and conferences and meeting people and doing stuff. So I'm the opposite. I thought I kind of realized I'm a shy extrovert. Because meeting new people is always kind of difficult, but that's independent really of introvert extrovert thing.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody's just like, oh, if you're shy, everybody thinks you're an introvert, and it's like, well, no.
Yeah.
You can want to be energized by human conversation and human sort of interaction, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be necessarily comfortable with talking to new people and new events and new things.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. It's more the exhaustion afterwards. I used to write for a local blog, and it took me a year to recover from just the exhaustion and it had nothing to do with the blog. It was just the constant being with people all the time.
Yeah.
Exhausted me. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually. I mean, I wonder if there's kind of some sort of biological difference between introverts and extroverts. In terms of like how it's something to do with the processing in your brain when you're in social situations, or it could be just something you learn or you go through, and it's kind of like you're either good at like processing like these confusing big situations, or you don't. It's it's interesting.
It also, I mean, it could go to I'm being the highly sensitive thing, like we talked about with James. What's his last name? James Prescott. Yeah. It could be that too. Being highly sensitive might be what is actually exhausting me versus the extrovert introvert thing. And I would think, knowing you come across as an extrovert as well.
Well, yeah, but that's you're seeing me now. I mean, like, I was way more introvert when I was well, not introvert actually. I think I've always been an extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't appreciate it, but I was way more shy when I was younger. And I think like losing Rachel and all of that stuff, it did help in as much as you kind of have to, when you're looking after somebody and you're kind of, I had to be her advocate really in like a lot of the medical situations. If somebody's disabled, they have no, like people just ignore them basically. You need somebody in your corner, pushing all the doctors and people to actually do something, because they were just like, I saw it with lots of people in the wards, like who were disabled and they couldn't communicate clearly, and like the doctors and nurses just treated them like terribly.
Were you alone in that advocacy? Was it you being her voice completely? And I ask you this because one, I think you watched the interview I did with April. She touched on that, and then my dad being an advocate for my mom, kind of watching that whole thing play out. How did that work, Tim?
I suppose well, I mean, to some extent, Dad and the rest of my family were a bit involved, but it kind of makes sense to have one person who's really the person pushing it forward. And I was her husband, so it's kind of like, well, it made sense for it to be me. And the funny thing is, because in my job I'd been promoted to managerial level, so I had more idea about. And the thing is, like, while I have an innate respect for people in general, I'm almost like very kind of, I don't have respect for people who think they deserve respect because of their position.
Yeah.
So I would quite often get into like rows with like the consultants and other people who were very kind of, they didn't like me, but it was effective. I got very good at working out how to play the system in the NHS, and there is a way to play it because, I mean, I'm sure there's similar things in the US system. You work out what works in terms of complaints and the rest of them. Probably threatening to sue is probably the thing in the US, but in the UK, there's the patients groups. I mean, the NHS is very peculiarly structured in that the doctors have their own kind of medical side, and then there's a parallel management hierarchy. And then there's this thing called the PALS, which is the patient advocate liaison group that every hospital had. And when you found out about them, they're actually very good at agitating in the managerial side. And I mean, this is the thing with big organizations. Big organizations can be deeply unfair to people who are not good at communicating or don't know the system. As soon as people know how to play the system, they get better treatment and they get better stuff by it's even if it's a big utility company or if it's a big thing. It's the whole like who you know, but also like how if you know how to do it. So yeah, I mean, I kind of learned a lot of like those tricks over the time that Rachel was in, because she was in about 3 hospitals. She was in hospital for like 11 months. So yeah, you start off naively kind of believing that all the medical staff have got the best interest of the patients at heart, and then you find out actually they're just human beings like everybody else.
Yeah. I remember my dad, I wasn't super involved. I wasn't really involved in this, but my dad had to be an advocate for my mom when she was in the hospital. And I think she was in, how long was she in? I want to say 5 months. And now she has home care, and he still has to be her advocate for home care. And I mean, you know, so you learn, yeah. And it's a constant learning process. So yeah, we wish everyone would have our best interests in mind, but there's so many patients, I guess, and we're human. And
well, I mean, I saw a video lately of this guy who extremely right-wing economist actually, but and he was saying, well, and there's some truth in this. The problem is that a lot of these organisations and things are set up with extremely good ideals, like this organisation is set up to do this particular thing by the government, but a lot of the time, the interests of the people in the organisation end up conflicting and distorting what the original objective was. So the example he gave was the US minimum wage, and the department that administers it is supposed to be testing the effectiveness of the minimum wage.
Yeah.
They're never ever going to say the minimum wage doesn't work in the US because then they're out of a job because that's their job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an interesting perspective. I think you have to factor in that, like, big organizations especially have issues, especially when you consider things like narcissists and petty squabbles within people within organizations, empire building. There's all sorts of things that happen in big companies and big organizations, which are just human factors. So a big company, I mean, it's like a lot of the time you find out that actually the company has got to the level where it doesn't necessarily need to care about the customers, because especially if it's got some sort of monopoly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you always, like, there's this kind of romantic idea that you can have, like, you can set up an organization to do a particular thing, and it can be the best idea in the world, but depending on how the organization is structured, it can actually cause other issues or be sabotaged or whatever.
Well, something you guys have that we don't have is everyone in the UK has healthcare through the NHS, right? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, the NHS and the US systems are basically the opposite extremes of healthcare systems. So we do have free at the point of use healthcare for most things. Though there are weird stuff in the NHS. So, like, dentistry has become virtually private for some reason.
Oh,
there is still NHS dentists around, but they're like, it's almost sort of, most people go private with dentistry because for whatever reason they introduce some sort of like reforms, and even if you go with an NHS dentist, you still end up paying for a lot of stuff. You just don't pay as much as you would in the private one. And similarly, like for drugs and other prescription items, most people pay a prescription charge. So that's usually limited, but that can be like £5 or whatever, something like that for the drug.
Yeah.
So you still have to pay for drugs and things. So there's still prescription charge. But on the other hand, hospital treatment, you don't have to pay anything for hospital food. You don't have to pay any charges to be a patient in hospital. And then there's no kind of people chasing you around for like payment of stuff, which there is in the US system. Yeah. And also cost control is a lot more. I mean, it's funny because I actually had when I worked in finance, I had like private medical cover for a while, and I ruptured my posterior ligament in my right knee, and I went to the NHS GP, and it was kind of, I said, well, I've got a private medical thing, and he referred me off to this, but he said, like, he felt on the back of my knee and said, I think you've done the posterior ligament, and you'll probably need physio and that. And then I went to the London Bridge Hospital. It's a private medical, so the same kind of system as what you have in the US, but the private medical in the UK is kind of queue jumping because there's a big issue with people queuing up for. So if I'd gone through the NHS system, I probably would have had to wait for like a month or 2 months for like an X-ray of my knee. But because it's private, I went there straight away.
Okay.
And I had this conversation with the doctor who was like, well, you don't really need an MRI scan, but given that it's a private scheme and I'm not paying for it and you're not paying for it, if you want an MRI scan of your knee, we can do that. And I'm like, okay. So I have an MRI, I have a X-ray, which shows basically what the NHS doctor told me. And then I go for an MRI scan, which is a total and utter waste of money. But I wasn't paying for it, and the doctor wasn't paying for it. It was paid under the insurance scheme. Okay. There was no incentive there to keep costs down. And that is the fundamental thing, is why you pay so much in the US, in that there is no cost control at all. Loads of, and because you've got this culture where everybody sues everybody, doctors don't want to miss a test or miss a thing. So they're going to give you all sorts of like stuff that you don't really need, but they don't want to be sued, so they'll give you like an MRI scan. I mean, I looked at the cost; it was like £800 for an MRI scan, and that was basically all paid for by the insurance company. So all the premiums of the other people who had that scheme all went up because they were like, well, we don't care. It's like, we're not paying for it.
I mean, the cost of going to the doctor, going to the hospital. I worked for a little bit where I inputted, in my 20s, I inputted the bill into the computer for healthcare agency. And oh my goodness, adding up every single thing, literally down to, let's say it's someone having a baby, diapers and food and every single detail you can possibly imagine, bed sheets, and oh my goodness, it all adds up. So, but our insurance, we look for jobs based on insurance. We talked about this with Jeremy after our show on Tuesday. It'd be fun to bring him back because it's interesting to hear how he thinks. But yeah, our medical insurance, you look for a job often based on whether they're going to pay for full health insurance coverage, whereas in the UK you get it regardless, and everyone. And then if you leave your job, you have the opportunity to purchase Cobra, which is an insane amount of money for the average person. So yeah, I'm.
Oh, they let you buy a snake so that you can just buy it.
I tweeted something out and I saw you comment. I know. But I'm universal health coverage. I'm very pro universal health coverage. Everyone should have health care, no matter what.
Well, I mean, it's like I did some maths, or math, as you guys call it. We call it maths. We write as maths with an S on the end of it.
I know. And you also say Z instead of Z.
But I did some maths when Rachel was ill because. Even though the situation with care is quite odd in the NHS.
Tim Stone just jumped on.
Woohoo.
We're talking about coverage. Tim Stone.
Care is so expensive in general. So like Rachel, I added up how much Rachel's care cost because we were moving from... There's a continuing care NHS scheme which goes for about a year or two, and we were coming near to the end of that. And then you go on to like local authority funding, which is like kind of limited. You have to make a larger payment towards it. Well, I added up that her care required, even with me doing all the nights and evenings, was like £90,000 a year. That was the amount of care she needed. So it's like, well, I couldn't have afforded that. And it's like, I think there was a limit on the amount you could pay local authority, but it still would have been like at least £30,000 or £40,000 a year.
Yeah.
And you can see how like in the US or somewhere where there's like insurance, if you don't have insurance and like your partner has some sort of like long-term health issue, that's not fair at all.
We can get to $1 million hospital bill really, really fast.
Yeah.
And you don't have proper insurance. And what now?
And do you wonder if donuts are donuts allowed in your healthcare policy?
I'm looking at his mask, and it almost looks like there's donuts on his mask. Is that a donut?
What? You mean his mask is a donut?
Is that what it is? It looks like a sprinkled donut. Does it? Am I making this?
It's just a mask. I think he's left now.
He's left.
I get rid of him by talking about talking about healthcare. So I think we managed to we do a show with like about 0 viewers.
Because these things are important to talk about. And I'm curious about other countries. I want to talk to people in New Zealand and South Africa and see how their healthcare is going.
Because I actually did like, when I was at university, I did a public economics course and we compared all these healthcare systems. They've all got issues. because the UK is very unusual in that basically it's just one massive organisation. It's I think it was like I'm not sure about the. You can look up the statistics of this, but I think it was like the world's third biggest employer. The two big ones were the Chinese Red Army, and the second one was the Indian Railways, and then it was the NHS.
Oh, got it. Okay. Oh, that's it.
Well, actually, let's go on to Wikipedia.
we're even if we're interested in these topics,
the thing is that the actual there's no other country in the world that has just basically one massive organisation that does healthcare.
And at the same time providing jobs, right?
Well, I mean, the list of largest employers. It's the fifth biggest now. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
So
Tim, something else I heard with the NHS is they pay for doctors and nurses to go to school. Is that correct?
It was. I know they stopped doing it, and I think they've started doing it again now because they really struggle with getting nurses, especially in the NHS. There's lots of immigration into the NHS because they don't pay well.
I mean, you go to school to be a doctor, and then you're left with a huge bill after becoming a doctor. So you think you're going into a field where you're going to be paid well, but you're still having to pay off massive school loans. And
so that's interesting. The US Department of Defense apparently is the biggest employer in the world. People's Liberation Army, Walmart, McDonald's, and NHS. Oh, and then the Indian Railways. So
okay.
Totally rubbish.
Interesting. Let's go back to this. US Department of Defense is the largest employer. In 2015, 3.2 million people. Wow. People's Liberation Army, China, 2.3 million in 2015. Walmart, 2.1 million people. McDonald's, 1.9 million. And then the National Health Service, 1.7 million.
Yeah.
I keep looking. Taiwan industry. What is that? What is that? Do you know what that is?
Where's that?
It's probably what is it? 3, 6, 9, 10 down, I think.
Oh, the Hong Kong. I've no idea. Well, Taiwan is the small.
Oh, here we go. What is this?
Oh, it's an electronics manufacturer.
Interesting. Technology. This company, like private employer, and one of the largest employers worldwide. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh. And then largest private and semi-private employers. Can we look at that? Look at that. Walmart, number 1. 3 National Patrol.
And then Amazon, number 7. I remember Volkswagen had so many people.
Amazon, number 7. Volkswagen, number 6. Compass Group. What's the Compass Group? Do you know?
I think they're
food service company.
Yeah, I've heard of them vaguely. Who are they made up of? Because a lot of the time they're made up of a merger of all sorts of other companies.
Okay.
Don't know.
Group, and the United States Postal Service is number 10.
Yeah.
Now we know. Huh. That's interesting to me. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, the thing is, the NHS, as I say, is a huge monolith of an organisation, and because most countries in the world and most countries in Europe have basically similar to the US, and it's insurance based, but they'll have some variant where either everybody has to pay insurance, like So, like, it's almost like, and the people who can't afford to pay insurance, it's paid for by the government, sort of thing.
Okay.
Because you get, I mean, there were two economic principles. I was talking economics with somebody on Twitter the other day on the Twitter.
Oh, and on Tuesday too. But wasn't economics your major?
Yeah, it was my major, but it's called moral hazard, and there's adverse selection, which are problems with insurance markets. And they're big problems, which is why the US healthcare system is screwed up. So adverse selection is like, let's say you've got insurance. Well, the silly example is like, let's say you've got insurance about getting pregnant. Now, the people who know they're going to have loads of kids are going to get insurance.
Yeah.
Or like childcare costs. And the people who know they won't or don't intend to won't. So you've got adverse selection. So fees will go up because the only people who are using it are people who know they need healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big problem with healthcare because a lot of the people who think they're healthy and they know they're healthy, they're not going to have health insurance or they're not going to pay the extra premiums. While people who have got existing or long-term health problems are going to push up fees for everybody. So that's one problem. That's called adverse selection. So the people with health issues will want to have insurance more than people who haven't got health issues.
Yeah.
And one way to get around that is obviously to make everybody pay.
Yeah.
Some way or t'other. It has to be compulsory. So that's a way to get over adverse selection. But you haven't got that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got a little element of it in terms of people will have to work and like everybody at the company will get health insurance.
Well, if you get pregnant here, you automatically get health insurance for a certain amount of time. I don't remember what the time period is, but you can, if you don't have health insurance already, you can get health insurance through the government and it will be paid for a certain amount of time after the baby is born. I don't remember the length of time.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the whole pregnancy thing but it's the same issue with anything. If you know you've got some sort of healthcare problem, you're more likely to want to take out insurance than if you don't. But the other thing is like, I mean, moral hazard is I got this the wrong way around. No, moral hazard is is actually where you have a choice.
Okay.
So pregnancy is a thing like. People who are insured for something are less likely to worry about it, so it's more likely to happen. That's what moral hazard is. So pregnancy is the thing. Like if you know you're insured for the cost of pregnancy, you're more likely to do it than if you haven't got whatever.
Yeah, looking at Tim's comment, I left for a while. Now you're talking about getting pregnant.
Yeah, well, I'm giving birth to a baby hippo tomorrow. So
wait, I thought we were talking about llamas and what, mongooses? Mongoose.
Yeah, well, I looked it up actually. That's interesting in that it is mongooses. It's not mongoose.
Mongoose.
Apparently, mongoose has started to be accepted in the dictionary as an alternative spelling because obviously the plural of goose is geese.
Yeah.
But a mongoose is not related to a geese. So actually, mongoose is the plural of mongoose.
Mongoose.
Mongoose is now an accepted alternative thing in the Oxford Dictionary. So
I mean, it almost sounds like mongoose could be the plural of itself. You know, those words were. Is it mongoose? Mongoose. Mongoose.
Mongoose. That sounds like a country in Africa somewhere.
Mongooses, llamas, lamai.
Llama, the Dalai Lama.
Now we're just being silly. Okay.
Most systems in the world are insurance based, but they basically force everybody to take insurance out because then you don't get all these weird self-selection problems.
Yeah.
The US is. Well, you kind of got bits of that, but that's but the UK has the opposite in as much as it's just a big organization, does everything.
Yeah. This is the important question of our time. The mongoose, the mongooses, the
I mongoose, you mongoose, he mongooses.
Mongoose. Love it. I love language, and I love learning that two English-speaking countries can be speaking different English. It's interesting to me. So,
Yeah.
And why? And you can see the influence. It seems like what it's coming down to, as I'm discovering this, is our English has a lot of Latin influence, and your English has a lot of French influence, and I could be completely wrong. So,
Well, I think I've said this before. I think British people are way better at pronouncing French words than most Americans. I think it might not be true, obviously, in places like Louisiana where there's a big French.
Yeah, that's true. Uh-huh.
While British people are terrible at pronouncing Spanish words, but Americans are pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I was thinking La Jolla was a place in.
La Jolla? Are you talking about La Jolla?
La Jolla. Well, I mean, that sounds phonetically. It's like La Jolla. La Jolla.
So there's the Spanish influence. Yeah. So we are very, very Spanish influenced, whereas it seems like perhaps
French is the bigger thing in the French words. But there was a guy. I wish I could find an article about this. I can't be bothered. I read a newspaper thing about this. There was a guy who set up the first. I think it was the Webster's Dictionary. What's the big American dictionary called? Is it Webster's or something like that?
Yes.
He basically was on a campaign to simplify the spellings and things in the English language, which is why you spell all the words with OU, just with O, because in his dictionary, his American dictionary, he was just like, well, we're going to simplify the spelling of all these words.
Yes.
And make it more.
That's why, because you spell color. Here's an example. You spell color COLOUR, correct?
Yeah. We same with armor.
Okay.
Lots of those words.
So we took a lot of those vowels out. So color here, COLOR. But yours, I would say the English, the way you guys spell things is very much, it's more romantic. It's more...
Well, I mean, to be honest, I mean, apparently that guy who changed all it, he had another version of his dictionary, and he was going to make even more changes to make it make more phonetic sense. But he didn't catch on his second wave. But his first changes did. I have to dig up an article about him. But literally, it was the guy who wrote the first American dictionary. He was responsible for just changing, because in both countries the language is quite. Because there wasn't until like the printing presses became common and everybody was able to read. Spellings were all a bit kind of open to interpretation, so to speak. And also, we had extra letters in our language in English as well. Yeah, well, apparently you see like ye olde shop and the rest of it.
Yeah.
Well, that was because there was a letter that looked like a Y. It was kind of I can't remember what it's called, but it wasn't a Y, but it was kind of the ye thing. But that sound was the same as the sound in the. So ye olde thing was actually pronounced the shop. Or the thing. Sorry. So instead of ye, it was actually the. That was what that letter sounded like. So nobody ever pronounced it as ye whatever. It was always the. It was just the letter they were using has died out. And there's a few of them mainly kind of in a lot of the Scottish and Irish words. They had different letters that have been dropped, and they changed them with other letters, and then the sounds of those. Like the name Siobhan in Irish is spelled totally differently to how it's pronounced. I think it's spelled Siobhan, Siobhan, something like that. Irish names are just basically a random collection of letters that make no phonetic sense whatsoever.
No, I'm learning all this. And I think so I'm thinking of words that are different. Do you spell favorite, FAVOURITE?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking of different.
It's our favorite word that's different.
Yeah, there's several words that are we spell it different, and we've shortened things, and we have different phrases, and it's interesting to me as I learn. But another thing I learned is that Scotland has locks.
Yeah.
versus lakes, or they have both, lakes and locks.
Yeah, well, a lot. Somebody was tweeting about this earlier, and I'm not entirely sure what the difference is, but yeah, loch is a word for. It's kind of like a big lake, I think. I'm not sure exactly what the definition is in Scotland. I mean, it was like I was in a Facebook group earlier, and somebody was saying the word close. In Scottish, close means more like an alleyway. Well, close, we would say it was a close. In the UK, on road names, you can often have something like this is peculiar. This is like Tulip Close or something like that. So it's like, or so and so drive or whatever. But close is a word. Close is a word for a name of a street. Apparently, Scotland, because they were saying about they were taking somebody out into the close to beat them up or something, and then they said, well, people understand that more as alleyway in the US, and I'm like, well, I don't even understand what that means in London. So it's even within the UK, there can be different regional variations and words and things. I mean, I'm kind of more on the sort of London internationalist kind of thing, but there are lots of regional, because this is one of the big differences between the UK and the US. In fact, the US and a lot of places, actually, your distances, because your country mainly grew up in the period of rail travel, certainly in the western side, distances between people and cultures were a lot bigger than in like the UK, where like people could ride to the next village or whatever, but you actually got tremendous differences in very short distances in the UK and Europe. Where in the US, it's like the East Coast, they grew up in that, those societies developed before rail travel, but the West and the Midwest, you were so much, so there's not as much difference in like different parts of California, say, as like, I mean, I'm not sure distance wise, but I suspect the top of California to the bottom of California is probably similar to like the UK to Greece. And like you would see so much difference between people gradually going between UK and Greece as opposed to, say, San Francisco and San Diego.
Yeah. Well, and going from California all the way to the East Coast, you see cultural differences.
Yeah, I mean, I have been surprised at how big a lot of the differences are in the US between people. But there's still, I mean, you can go in the UK. I mean, I can go on a train a couple of hours and be in a totally different place.
Yeah. Tim, I think we've run our show.
Yeah, we've done a bonus episode for our viewer.
Never quizzed me. What were you going to quiz me on?
Well, we could do this next week, actually.
Is it a surprise? Should we keep it a surprise?
Yeah, I can formulate the idea more. It's basically you doing a virtual road trip across the US.
Without getting lost, or what?
No, well, the idea I had was that I was gonna like split up. Like you have to get from San Diego to New York by giving me like 10 or 12 places that can't be a certain distance away from each other, more than a certain distance away from each other.
Okay.
And then we can see how wrong you get, and like, so like on the way, like planning your road trip to New York or something.
I don't actually get there because I end up.
Well, no, because you'd have to be like, you couldn't go more than 200 miles per stop or something. But I like, that's what I was saying about 2,500 miles is apparently how far it is.
That sounds like a game invention, Tim. You should invent that game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I do it next week, if you remind me next week, I can actually do a little bit of programming on the old Excel spreadsheet, and maybe I can have an exciting little kind of a thing that's like
patent this idea. I think it sounds kind of brilliant for a game.
Well, it's probably already been done, and I'm probably breaking somebody else's patent. That's the trouble with patent.
All right. We're headed off. Thank you, Tim Sohn, for popping in and saying hi, and happy donating to you. And we'll see everyone soon. Tim, I'll see you Tuesday. We have who's coming on Tuesday?
I think it's Amanda Webb.
Amanda Webb. Yay, I'm excited. I joined her Facebook group, so I'm excited.
Oh yeah, no, Amanda Webb's awesome. I think it's like we've had all the exciting, quite stern ministerial writing people who were great fun to talk to, actually, especially old Jeremy Ritch. He was fantastic after the show and before the show.
Absolutely.
So we were like, oh yeah, we didn't really get anywhere, but
we need to bring him on a Thursday to chat if we want to go in depth in some of these conversations. He's a brilliant mind. So that would be fun.
No, he's a lot of fun. So yeah, we've got the other extreme now. We've got another social media lovey. So,
I'm going to Ireland on Tuesday. I'm excited.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, Tim.
Bye.